John McMullen from 97.3 ESPN.com, set to join us here as we take a look deeper at Eagles Cowboys. We're getting close to this one now. Sunday night is just around the corner, John. The coordinators spoke today. I think Jim Schwartz kind of highlights when these coordinators talk, but Jim is really in a different spot this week, John. And last week he went up against a poor offensive line, against a team that not very proficient offensively. You could send the blitz. Bradford, not a lot of movement. This week, good offensive line. If you do blitz, you got Prescott back there. This is a lot different challenge for Jim Schwartz.
Yeah, it's a much different challenge, and we kind of addressed that earlier in the week. It's if you're going to win this football game, you're going to have to do it in a different method. And that's not to say you can't, but it's just a different style matchup. And while you point out those things very astutely, and they're all true, on the other hand, you look at the other side of the football, and even though Dallas has statistically been among the better defenses in the NFL, talent-wise, they're not close to what Minnesota brought. So you would expect the offense to be able to carry at least more of its own water, and they're going to have to. If they want to win this football game, they're going to have to produce more than they did against Minnesota, because the same defensive success is not going to be there. It's just the reality of playing the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, here's one interesting point that I look at, John. The Cowboys, not a great defense. They can be beat in the secondary, but the Eagles, as we kind of talked a little bit about yesterday, they don't have that guy to take the top off the defense, stretch the field kind of guy, and that's where the Cowboys are weak. So your weakness is kind of their weakness, right?
Well, actually, when I look at that Dallas defense, I think the secondary is the strength of that particular defense. Now, while I say that, it's still not a top tier. You're not looking at Xavier Rhodes, Harrison Smith, people like that, but you have guys, Morris Claiborne's having a good season, Byron Jones, really talented defensive back. So when I look at just from a talent perspective, the Dallas defense, I would say the back end is better than the front seven. But it's interesting, everything with the Dallas Cowboys reverts back to their running game, because Dallas is 7th in the NFL in, points allowed per game, which is really, really good. But that's because they're rarely on the field. And Dallas leads the NFL in time of possession. They obviously lead the NFL in rushing, so many different rushing categories, and that helps the defensive side of the football. So I look at it and you say, on paper, you say, well, that Dallas defense is pretty good, and Rod Marinelli's known for getting more out of what it looks like on paper. He seems to do it every single year. But you can attack it at points. The question is, as I said, on the other side of the football, how are you going to be able to do against the Dallas running game? Are they going to be on the field 34 minutes, the offense? So there's a lot of questions, and they all really funnel to the Dallas Cowboys rushing attack.
Yeah, this game features the NFL's two most deliberate offenses. The Eagles average, John, 32 seconds per play. They're the slowest team in the NFL. Think about where they were the last 3 years. The Cowboys average 30 seconds per play. That is second slowest in the NFL. And when you look at time of possession, Cowboys 33 minutes, 8 seconds. Eagles 32 minutes, 16 seconds. They're second and third in the league. So it seems like something's got to give this week.
Yeah, and it is. It's a lot of it is strength versus strength. Another thing I did on my 5 of the Cowboys is how productive Dallas has been in the red zone as an offense. I think a lot of that has to do with Dak Prescott and ability to have a dual threat at the quarterback position. Not that he runs a ton, but you have to respect him, and that creates an issue. It really takes almost an extra defender away on each and every play, and I think that's why the Cowboys are so effective when they're down near the goal line. Conversely, and you saw it last week against Sam Bradford, the Eagles are the best team defensively in football, defending in the red zone. So throughout this matchup, you do see strength versus strength, and even the most high-profile one of them all is the Cowboys have the best offensive line in football, and the Eagles have one of the 4 or 5 best defensive fronts in football. So it really is a strength versus strength in a number of different places.
And, John, it's not just the offensive line. Witten, Dez Bryant, and then when we talked to Sal Pal, he brought up the name Cole Beasley and said Cole Beasley's turned into a mini Edelman. The other thing he told us is because he talked to Malcolm Jenkins in the locker room, and that Jenkins said they are rethinking the idea of Jenkins on Beasley. How do you think that the Eagles secondary gets shook up this week, and how do they solve that puzzle of matchup issues that they have?
Yeah, it really is a problem. Cole Beasley's a big problem because Malcolm Jenkins, and I talked about it earlier in the week, he's a good slot cornerback, and you saw that last season. But what he is he's a big guy who's very, very physical, and he can really handle bigger receivers. Cole Beasley, the exact opposite of that. Very, very small, short area quickness guy, tremendous on option routes. And that's the kind of guy Malcolm doesn't have a lot of success with. And it's happened in the past. He struggled with Cole Beasley. So I think Jim Schwartz is smart enough to recognize that. And he's the kind of defensive coordinator that's not going to put together a plan and say, this is our plan each and every week. He's going to look at the other team. He's going to make adjustments. And if that means having the 3 corners on the field, Leotis McKelvin, Nolan Carroll, Jalen Mills, if that's a better matchup, and I think it is this week, I think he's going to look more toward that.
Do you anticipate that Dez Bryant's full go for the Cowboys and they try to exploit him big time, or do you anticipate that they try to have, ease him back into it?
Well, I'll just say this. Dez Bryant hasn't been the same player since coming back from the Jones fracture last season. So I know everyone sees that name and they're scared about Dez Bryant being on the field because they remember the player he once was, but he hasn't been that guy since he came back from that Jones fracture. And now he's coming off another injury. And as I said, Cole Beasley has really been their best receiver, even when Dez was healthy earlier this year. And I think it's going to be similar to that. Until I see Dez Bryant be Dez Bryant again, I'm not going to predict he's going to go off for 140 yards or anything of that. He just hasn't shown the same explosion as a player that he had before that injury.
If I gave you 3 choices of which offensive Cowboys weapon should concern the Eagles the most, is it Elliott, is it Prescott, or is it other?
Well, I'll put it this way: if I put the top 3, 1 would be Elliott, 2 would be Elliott, and 3 would be Elliott. That's what I was saying. Everything about the 2016 Dallas Cowboys funnels back to their running game, and obviously a lot of it has to do with the offensive line. But Ezekiel Elliott has been spectacular. And there's no getting around it. He has been as advertised, even better than advertised. So if you can find a way to stop him or at least slow him down, you got a much better chance to win that football game.
Yeah, and, I guess when you mentioned how much Elliott is, he is very talented. He's been the best rusher, 130 yards 3 times this year. But let's not, make no bones about it. This offensive line is far superior to the offensive line the Eagles dominated last week against Minnesota.
Oh, unquestionably. I mean, you're talking about one of the 5 worst offensive lines in football versus the best in a week span. And it starts with the 3 first-round picks. You got a Pro Bowl player at center and Travis Frederick. You got, I think, has been the best offensive lineman regardless of position in the NFL this year, Zach Martin at right guard. And you have Tyron Smith at left tackle, who's an all-pro level player there. And you saw, if I were to rate the 2 best tackles in football, they're both in the NFC East. 2 best left tackles. One of them's Tyron Smith, one of them's Trent Williams. And you saw a couple weeks ago what Trent Williams was able to do against the Eagles. So, yeah, it's a tough matchup.
So is this more of, say, Marcus Smith, Vinny Curry than Connor Barwin this week?
I wouldn't say more. Connor's going to get the majority of snaps, but it is going to be scaled back, as Jim mentioned, going into the Vikings game. And they were scaled back a little bit against Minnesota. It didn't matter because they were going against DJ Clemmings and Jake Long, so he wasn't going to have an issue anyway. But that plan comes more into place this week because the last thing you want is a worn-down Connor Barwin trying to deal with Teron Smith in the fourth quarter. So I think you are going to see more reps for Vinny Curry, especially at right defensive end, to give Connor a bit of a breather.
Yeah, and the Eagles had trouble with a bigger back, a guy like Matt Jones, who really gashed them pretty good, and that had to do with the offensive line of Washington. This is a tenfold. This is much better than even that Washington offensive line, who has good players. But as a unit, Dallas is much better than even Washington, right, John?
Yeah, they are. I mean, Washington's good also, and they're getting better because Brandon Sheriff's turning into a really good player, Morgan Moses. So they both have good offensive lines, but you're talking Washington, probably top half in the league. And as I said, with Dallas, you're talking about probably number one. And the strength is run blocking. Occasionally you'll be able to get them, especially from Brandon Graham's side and pass protection. But as far as being a run blocking unit, they are so far above everybody else in this league. It's really not close, and it's obviously going to be a tall test for the Eagles.
The Eagles and the Cowboys this Sunday night right here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, John has 5 on the Cowboys. You can find out a little bit more about this Cowboys team at our website, 973ESPN.com. Todd Archer from ESPN.com, NFL Nation, going to join us in just a couple of minutes to talk more about the Cowboys side of things, John. And, of course, he'll be back with his pick on tomorrow's show. We'll leave you with this. On the offensive side of the ball, the Eagles, we talked about the secondary and the lack of wide receivers, which we know. But is this a week where they can get the tight ends more involved? Is that an area where the Dallas defense can be exploited a little bit?
Well, again, I think if you execute, you can exploit the Dallas defense in a number of different ways. That's one of them, although Sean Lee is when he's healthy, he's one of the better coverage linebackers in football. So he might be one of their best players on the defensive side. But as a whole, that group, it doesn't exactly scare me. The key for the Eagles is going to be pass protection, and has been pass protection since Lane Johnson left the lineup. And the concern is that you're back on the road. Silent count is back into the equation. Noise is back into the equation. And we saw Vaitai did not handle that well in Washington. We'll see if he learned from it. We'll see if he got any better. But they have to make Carson Wentz feel more comfortable. And if he does, I think you can exploit the Dallas defense in a number of ways.
All right, John will give us pick on tomorrow's show. We'll have plenty more on this Eagles-Cowboys matchup, which is probably the best one of the week for the NFL. You got a real bad one tonight, Jacksonville and Tennessee, but it ends up with a Sunday nighter that's pretty darn good. John, we'll talk to you tomorrow, pal. Oh, by the way, I got your text last night. Would you like to share about the big fella in Philly?
Which one? Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid is the greatest big man in the history of the NBA.
Yeah, that one.
No hyperbole there.
I like jumping the gun. No, he was phenomenal. That was great to see. Energy in the building. And then, I'm really excited. And then you get down, you're in a close game, and you need a bucket, and your best option is Gerald Henderson. So that part was a little disappointing.
Yeah.
Drove me crazy too, John. That's exactly what I said to Mike. Really? Gerald Henderson was the best way they could go.
It was a good night, though. It was a good night, but I was laughing when he sent me that text message. All right, John, we'll catch up soon.
Hey, thank you.